Sabrimala hearings are coming up. 7th to 9th, 14th to 16th, 21st to 22nd. But they are not specific to Sabrimala. And I'm not going to reveal anything. What you need to know is just this, that 3 other matters have been combined with it. The entry of Parsi women into Agyaris, should they marry outside the community. Second is the female genital mutilation issue related to the Dawoodi Bohra community. And then this has been clubbed. Strictly speaking, I don't see the reason for clubbing. Because I don't see a correlation. I don't see why all of them have to be connected. But 7 broad questions have been raised by the court. Those who wish to make notes and those who are interested in deeper study can perhaps make notes. Which is, the 3 broad questions raised are, how do rights under Article 25 interplay with rights under Article 26? I'll explain each of these. Second, when Article 25(2) uses the word section of Hindus within the scope of it, what is the meaning of section of Hindus? Does it mean a denomination, a sect? What does it mean? 3, who can file a public interest litigation against religious institutions, challenging the religious practice of an institution? 4, are courts, including constitutional courts, qualified to look into issues of religion? Especially, are they good enough as institutions to distill what is an essential religious practice of an institution or a group? These are the broad questions. When we speak of cultural dialogue in the context of judiciary, it actually goes back to the reason why I had to initiate this conversation in the first place. Because I have seen a lot of whining and bellyaching on social media where the entire judiciary is painted as a monolith with respect to its treatment of Hindu institutions. I'm the last person to disagree with the sentiment of it. Because I have myself have aired similar tirades but in a slightly more measured fashion in the past. But never have I ever resorted to an institutional coloring, because the institution exists in your head. We deal with individuals within the institutions. And therefore we get to see a fair degree of diversity. Having said that, there is one common layer across the board. And what is that common layer? That common layer is those who are also non-left wish to be seen as left. Those who are also non-left wish to be seen as left because they don't want their non-left leanings either to be demonstrated or to be tested in a matter. So let's assume for a moment you have a member of the bench who leans left, and you have a member of the bar who also leans left. Neither of them needs to be unabashed, or let's say abashed about their leanings. They will also equally say left, and these people will also say left. But if the combination were different, whichever way it is, and if the member of the bench is otherwise non-left, they would want to say, I will indulge you also. And I have no problems moving in that direction. Okay? And similarly, if you have a member of the bar who is non-left and the member of the bench is left, then you will have to pander or cater to that leaning. So what this tells you is that there is a boundary condition which is common, which all of us are expected to operate within, notwithstanding your individual proclivities. And that is what this entire fight or this entire issue has been about. That since when has left become the normal except outside of the roads? Right? So why should that be the case? Why should keep left be the norm even within courts? Now, if you want to have a compare and contrast exercise, as much as I loathe saying this, the reality is pre-independent courts were vastly more accommodative of your sentiments than post-independent courts. You might have succeeded in proving your case with respect to Ram Janmabhoomi in a less cumbersome fashion and in a quicker fashion if this were a British Indian court prior to 1947 or 1950. And there's a reason for it. So they had state and non-state actors. The state actors were under, let's say, a self-imposed imposition, or for the sake of optics, to act neutral and play neutral. The radicalism was left to evangelists, so that they can say this has got nothing to do with us. So the non-state actors would be delegated the task of gradually converting the population through schools, education, caste, whatnot, and poverty, rice bags, whatever it may be. The state would say, no, we subscribe only to fair play and equity and justice. That would be at least the lip service. And in the process, what they would do is, they would basically try and say, this is the position according to your scripture, fine. I am not in a position to debate your scripture with you. I will only test the consistency of your position within your scripture. If what you say falls within your scripture, so be it. I will not interfere any further. That explains why they had the Shariat Act of 1937, which is such a short legislation, which only said, whatever is consistent with the Sharia is within this. That's it. Without discussing any other body of case law, without trying to create several provisions, they did nothing of that sort. Even till date, several temples in Tamil Nadu run on British court-made schemes. And they are so brilliant and beautiful. I don't like saying it. There is a degree of grudge that you can't decipher from what I'm saying, but it is actually workable till date. So, within the Iyangars, there used to be a fight of Vadagalai Tengalai, which is the southerners and the northerners, sects. So, what would be the namam that would be applied? Who would get the right to actually take the elephant out for the procession during the course of a temple festival? Similarly, Iyers may have certain issues, and across denominations, not limited only to the south or only to Iyers and Iyangars. So those issues were resolved with such brilliant schemes, including temple control schemes, because they actually practiced the policy of a safe distance from the religious institution, saying, this does not belong to my religion. This is not the church. I understand very little. So I will go with what you say. That's it. So long as it doesn't fly in the face of public policy. So long as you don't try and justify human sacrifice. So long as it does not enter the realm of criminal law. The Indian state, in stark contrast, if it had actually followed even that policy, there is a decent chance that your ability to protect your culture, faith, customs and traditions would have been better. Before I actually come across as giving a clean chit to the British, please understand that most of your temple control legislations are a product of the Board of Revenue created by the British East India Company as part of what they call the Board of Revenue, when they took over the temples and mosques initially and then gave up control over the mosques, I think around 1863. So until 1863, they actually had a control over temples as well as mosques. And then that community rebelled and said, give it up. Of course, they certainly had this Protestant strain where they had a problem with any priestly profession and priestly institution, especially the Brahmin, and therefore they had a problem with Brahmin-controlled institutions according to them, when the fact is Brahmins have never controlled temples. They've only operated in the realm of religious affairs. The position of Dharmakarta, which is the Shebayat or the servitor in the temple, has been typically wielded by landed communities. You've had the Nayakars in some places, or Naidus as you may want to call them. You've had the Kamavari Naidus, for that matter, in Andhra and other places. So landed communities have been responsible for management of secular affairs, the property related aspects, therefore the Dharmakarta. Religious aspects are left to the Brahmin, or someone who occupied a Brahmin-like position in a temple which had a non-Brahmin priest. Okay? So, it's not linear, it's not neat, it's not compartmentalized, but by and large, they operated with the assumption that since this is a hornet's nest that I don't wish to stir, and it is bound to create religious rebellion, let me operate with a principle of safe distance. If you look at how we have progressed since the 1950s, it has only become worse. Because there is a curious mix that works as far as Indian institutions are concerned. And remember one thing, when you speak of the judiciary, as much as it wants to be independent and sees itself as an independent institution, takes its cue from the government on certain matters of policy. Because the government is the biggest litigant and the government is the biggest entity in court. And remember that courts follow the principle of treating every law as constitutional until proven otherwise. That is the standard presumption. One of the presumptions that we use when we look at statutory interpretation is the burden to prove unconstitutionality is on the party who challenges the constitutionality, otherwise it will be treated as constitutional. Everything that the parliament does is right until proven wrong. So, if you want to take the judiciary outside the scope of, let's say, the three organs of the state and just focus your attention with a laser sharp vision, with a tunnel vision on that institution and say, let us see how the judiciary has always been anti-Hindu, you will not succeed without looking at the ambience around that institution in that Kalakhand, so to speak. Is it any surprise that the Nehruvian state also had a Nehruvian judiciary? It went hand in hand for the most part. Because the Nehruvian state's presence ensured that history books were Nehruvian in their outlook. The general approach to internal policy making and external foreign policy were Nehruvian in approach. Your approach to environment was Nehruvian. Your approach to Hindu Dharma was Nehruvian. Which means law schools would have also been Nehruvian. Judicial training academies would have been Nehruvian. And you suddenly expect an anti or a non-Nehruvian institution in the court. How is that going to be possible? Because there is a certain degree of normative tendencies which were established through the Nehruvian state successfully, which are battling till date. They understood the value of education, they understood the value of culture in the realm of policy and economics, and they understood the value of long-term impact through policy, where power is the means to policy. And therefore, the entrenchment in bureaucracy, which means it goes back to Lavasna, which is the Lal Bahadur Shastri Center for this training for the bureaucrats. What do you think happens there? What do you think is the curriculum that is taught there? I don't know if the curriculum has changed post 2014, but significantly it's been Nehruvian. And when you say Nehruvian, therefore it continues from the British made policy. The original curriculum that was actually set up by, so his book along with Max Muller's books were actually made mandatory reading for bureaucrats for the training. Please help me with the name of the book, please. I'm sorry? James Mill, right? It has three parts, the Muslim part, the British part, sorry, the Hindu part, Muslim part, and the British part, and that's how he traces the history of Bharat. And every stereotype that you associate with Hindu Dharma, the entrenched casteism that you associate with it, and the Brahminical stereotypes come from that book. All of them were heavily pushed into the bureaucratic setup. So while you had some people who would come through the judiciary, but the district magistrates and people who were subsequently appointed to the Supreme Court in Calcutta, Fort St. George, or let's say in Mumbai, or in Chennai or Calcutta, they were people who were from the British executive side who switched over to the judicial side. Policymakers and lawmakers who would then be appointed as judges. Now, whether it is the Indian army or the judiciary, Indian judiciary, they take huge pride in their pre-independent British history. You celebrate the same colors, the same flags, the same motto, the same victories. Some of the victories that some of your contingents celebrate are the ones fought against Hindu princely states, for God's sakes. Whatever is the, from the cutlery to the ballroom dining that the Indian army follows, those traditions, those table manners are from the British. So when they say we are a secular institution, where do you think this comes from? Not from Hindu Dharma, for God's sakes. They take such serious pride that apparently their religious identity, they merge into the background and they completely meld and enmesh and whatever they say. All of that is a product of it because he wanted you to forget everything. Because if he kept your religious identity alive, he'd have mutiny on his hands. So he would keep the Jati identity alive, but he would ask you to focus not on the religious identity. That was the trick that he played. So your judicial institutions also partake the very same character. So if you want to suddenly undertake a surgical strike with respect to judicial conscience and character and nature and treat that as an institution which operates in a silo, you were born yesterday. So this dialogue about culture also requires a broader policy change. And that discussion cannot start and end with symbolism. It needs serious investment in education, and I've said this even before. Can you hope to have a different outcome if fundamentally in law schools there is not a single reference to any Hindu school of thought, philosophy? The only place or subject where Hindu philosophy becomes relevant is succession, matrimonial disputes. Other than that, there is no contribution whatsoever, even in the stream of commerce. It's not as if we did not have bills of exchange, hundis and promissory notes and so many financial instruments prior to the British man entering this country, right? If that is the case, why is it not part of any of your principles of contract? So while you may want to have this broader conversation, the request is, since this is an audience which I believe and I hope is certainly much more elevated than the audience on X, which on a regular basis likes to, there are multiple B words there, but I'll stop at whining, where their only job is to constantly cry about it without realizing that it's a complex issue. And the beginning has to be made with a larger policy intervention. And the larger policy intervention, whether you like it or not, starts only from education and nowhere else. Assume for a moment that you're thinking of the three-year LLB program or the 5-year integrated program, whichever way you see it. Someone enters at the age of 18 or someone enters at the age of 23, one of these two. So by and large, the people who enter the 3-year program come from commerce, economics, political science, English literature. Which of these streams, according to you and their existing curricula, are sympathetic at the very least to your point of view? No, I don't think so, not yet. I don't know if NEP 2020 has actually achieved that goal yet. Let's come to the 5-year program. Almost every entrenched 5-year program in established law schools will have a feminist, Dalit, transgender alliance. Now make of it what you will. That should tell you where we stand there. Now, let me clarify, because this reel goes out and creates another controversy, because there are so many journalist people on X. Sai Deepak ने अब कुछ कह दिया, इस पे react तो करना ही पड़ेगा. ये कैसे कुछ कह सकता है? I'm wearing blue, so let's leave it. Not on purpose. This is Vishnu, nobody else. One, I am not on the merits of each of the constructs within that alliance. I'm just saying the way they have pitted themselves and pitched themselves, it has always worked to the detriment of the civilization, because they've been active tools of cultural balkanization, which will ultimately, they hope, will lead to territorial balkanization. That's the hope. That's where it starts. So I'm trying to say that you can have conversations in the judiciary, but if you think you can treat the judiciary as a special purpose vehicle or a project on its own, it may not be possible. So what is it that you can do at best? Okay, let's think of it this way. Let's start with the amendment of the Constitution. And I'm preempting a lot of questions today. You can think of better questions, but please don't ask these questions. Can the government do it? A government can do a lot of things. If they can do 370, they can do a lot more than that, right? Right. So let's not question whether they can do it within the 4 corners of the Constitution. It starts and stops at political will. That's one. Second, even if you change the Constitution, remember one thing. Legislative changes must go hand in hand with broader societal changes, because the weapon that they've wielded consistently is the most constitutional of your amendments since 2014 have faced a perception barrier, because there is a subterranean flow that goes on uninterrupted, which is education. You cannot hope to address constitution separately without addressing this. Law schools are supposed to celebrate free speech. Okay, fine. Let's say how many of these law schools can actually have a town hall on the most vilified document, which is, name it. Thank you, you know the answer. Have a conversation only on Manusmriti. Let's see wherever it goes. Only on Manusmriti, tested on every possible anvil. Liberalism, feminism, Ambedkarism, constitutionalism, every ism that you can think of. Do it. And also undertake a compare and contrast exercise with other documents. You cannot mention it. You cannot mention it. And that tells you where your perceptions of power end. If that topic is a no-go zone in a law school where free speech is supposed to be protected, celebrated, practiced, and exercised, that tells you the state of affairs. This is not pre-2014. This is not 2004 to 2014. This is 2026. And this is still the state of affairs. It hasn't changed. And there are 3 newspapers which I think broadly members of the judiciary broadly read from what we understand. The Print, the Hindu, the Indian Express, and some people the Wire. Not even the New Indian Express. So if there are articles placed prior to an important matter, opinions are being formed and fed prior to the hearing to say this is the line. You are expected to fall in line. That is how opinions are manufactured. The law is not, the beginnings of laying down the law don't start in court. That's where it culminates. But where does it start? Newspapers, universities, 5,000-year atrocity literature, which creates a policy justification for everything under the sun. There will not be a more communist nation than Bharat. There will not be a more, redistributionist nation than Bharat. Sorry, India, post-1947. You don't need a Cuba. You don't need a Russia. You need only us. The mother lode and the lodestone, or the mothership and lodestone of every redistribution policy starts from this place. Max Miller was right. You can't find anywhere else in the world what you can't find in India. People might say, he practices before this court, therefore he is defending the institution. He is a stakeholder, therefore he is being very careful. He is now therefore throwing the blame on the politics of it and the society of it as opposed to looking inward into the judiciary. I challenge you to prove me wrong. Now, your time starts now. Start. Go ahead. So the Q&A opens now. One request, please don't be a typical Indian audience. Use this for short questions and questions alone. Not to demonstrate or exhibit how great you are or how good you are on something. Focus only on questions. I am happy to answer questions.
Hello, my name is Professor Rakesh Mehrotra. Namaste. I am trustee of Infinity Foundation, Rajiv ji. Very simple question. The crux of the game is the Constitution of India.
Right.
And that is the holiest book and the dirtiest book.
I agree with one and disagree with another. Now I leave it to you to decide which one.
No. And now, one second. And this Constitution of India gives us a democracy, so-called democracy, where the average IQ of a politician is just 50.
And what about people? What is their average IQ?
Yeah, that's what they represent us.
Have they been parachuted from the past?
No, they represent us.
Right.
And what do you expect out of them? Nothing. So what is the recipe with you? How to solve the problem?
I don't think we should have empowered everyone to vote at the outset.
Exactly, that's the thing. How to do that?
I disagree with it. And this is not on gender basis. No country which started at our level should have opened up the ballot box to everyone.
Exactly.
Because therefore you're saying that garbage and gold are equal in their ability to decide our destiny. I'm sorry, that's not the case. And we take pride in it and we constantly say till the cows come home, pun intended, God knows for what reason.
So how to resolve it? My problem is how to resolve the thing.
Unfortunately, you can't take this back because it's like occupying a seat in an unreserved compartment. जिसको मिल गया उसको छोड़ेगा नहीं.
वो छोड़ेगा नहीं और मीडिया में कोई डिस्कशन नहीं हो सकता. Why this Hindu will keep on going?
Your only hope, and generally your only hope, and this is what is the discussion about the missed bus and the missed train as far as Bharat is concerned, is education and industrialization, so that you can actually lift that lot and bring them to a point where you can have a same conversation on policy and economics. Otherwise, in this case, if you give a vote or the power of vote or the ballot to people, if it is classist, elitist, Brahmanwadi, Manwadi, so be it, I don't care. Because this is regardless of caste, I'm only on the economics and the educational background of it. What then happens is, it is a democracy on paper, which then allows people with special interest groups to manipulate those vote banks.
Correct.
And what you have at the end of the day is less than 15,000 people running the country in principle. Maximum 15 to 20,000 people. Please.
Sai, what do I do of these particular type of democracy and these type of persons when you have got China across you?
One important point was one question only.
Yeah. Thank you. I will talk to you later on.
Namaste, sir. So my question to you is that how are we bringing change in our legal studies? Are we bringing Indic jurisprudence in any way?
Thank you.
Thank you.
So when the NEP came out, I wrote a piece and we pointed out one thing. Take up NEP 2020. Please, can someone pull it out? There is only one section addressing the legal aspect, and guess what it speaks of? I have no problems with a forward-thinking policy which also factors in the impact of AI on it. Was there any change discussed with respect to legal curriculum in that document? Please read it out. I'm happy to be corrected. If my memory serves me right, which it usually does, please go through it. No discussion with respect to Indic jurisprudence. No discussion, because you see, when the BA LLB program, the way it is structured, so it's an integrated program, otherwise LLB is 3 years and BA is 3 years. So it's condensed into 5 years. So the BA part, I believe, because I've never been through it, is about 2 years. But that's where the foundations of political science and all other important subjects are fed, which is the humanitarian base before you jump into the applied sciences, which is law. There are two problems with it. One, the curriculum. Second, people. Therefore, the content and the messenger both are problematic. By and large, you will find professors and members of faculty who bleed hard blue. And whose entire discussion, it's like, some people when they go for an examination और उन्हें जितना पढ़ा है उनको उतना ही आता है, तो आप सवाल कुछ भी पूछ लो, घूम फिर के वहीं पे आते हैं. You start with constitution, जाति, environment, जाति, women, जाति नहीं, ब्राह्मण. Okay, you take it in whichever direction. Economics, another B, banya. Okay. And what this tells you is, the policy makers don't have the courage of their conviction to take on this ecosystem. Otherwise, they would have made a change there. 2026, what is the change on that? So, if people keep, after a point, taking pot shots, and like, it's lazy analysis. It is lazy analysis. And I will 100% stand for the institution there and say, you don't have the guts to change anything at the law school stage. आप क्या वहाँ पे change करेंगे भाई? Okay, then we'll be told there's a paucity of talent and therefore we have not been able to do this.
There's a paucity of
Not
talent
true.
and therefore we have not been able to do
So many of these people who have been silently working, surviving in the ecosystem, who could have been empowered.
So many of these people who have been silently
Who could have been empowered?
surviving in the ecosystem.
If you can empower movie making, why not?
Who could have been empowered?
You could have done this.
Empowered movie making, why not?
Now, this is not.
You could have done this.
I'm again going to be told this is he is a Congress
this
agent.
is not.
Okay,
I'm again going to be told.
I'm a Hindu agent. I'll keep it at
He is
that.
a Congress agent.
My point is very simple. I hope I am. The point is, you have multiple opportunities to enter that space.
You have
Which means
and
you could have
multiple
commissioned
opportunities
works.
into that space.
You could have
means-
proposed alternatives, get the conversation started. अगर आपका ये मानना है कि विवाद के बगैर सब कुछ हो जाएगा, नहीं होगा. So if the standard operating procedure is 6 फुट की दूरी from विवाद, you will not survive because they thrive on vivad, and it is like fighting elections in Bengal. If you don't have the muscle to actually push your way through, you will have to concede that you don't have what it takes to survive in this jungle. ये तो आपको मानना ही पड़ेगा. And which means some are disruptive interventions. When you start that process, तैयारी के साथ जाना बेहतर होता है. So I'll tell you how they typically work. So what happened is, in my previous avatar, prior to going independent in 2016, and I guarantee this is not Atmastuti, as part of a law firm, I have worked for Greenpeace in their matters which relate to fundamental rights, constitutional rights, as well as IP rights. I have given advice to this organization called Bandhwa Mukti Morcha. Now, this is where I'm going to give credit to them, and you have to lump it, you have to swallow it. It is important that you recognize their strengths. They take up the most uncomfortable of subjects, and they create people who are a single agenda fanatics. People who go so deep into each of these issues. And I had the benefit of citing or quoting one such person at one of my previous interactions at Delhi University Law Faculty, Professor Anup Surendranath. He was among the people to invite me on the CA debate at NLU Delhi in 2019 before COVID broke out. But because of security concerns, ultimately they had to shelve it. He runs the death penalty center. It is one of the few centers in this country which has created a repository of data and jurisprudence on how death penalties have been awarded in this country. Can you name one person from this side who has done that? One is, if there are people who are willing to do that also, you need a, let's say, gravy train to support them. So that is what you need to look at. Second, they do choose these topics. You can say funding yahan se aata hai, wahan se aata hai, kahin se bhi aane do. But they've decided to give up corporate careers to focus on this issue. That's one. Second, I've seen how brilliantly they prepare on policy-related issues. So, this Greenpeace issue, you can actually check it up. Judgment of 28th of January 2010, Justice Ravindra Bhatt, when he was before the Delhi High Court as a single judge, Tata Sons versus Greenpeace. This judgment basically was Greenpeace taking a position against the Dhamra port in Odisha, which was originally constructed by the Tatas and then taken over by the Birlas, I think. I think so. I could be wrong, or maybe L&T. I don't remember exactly. Their entire problem was the Dhamra port was being constructed on the nesting grounds of olive ridley turtles, which are endangered species. And the way they pursued this issue and the way they had their legal strategy and otherwise, of course, we were also responsible for crafting the legal strategy. We managed to establish that they have the right to criticize and make fun of the builders of the port. So what they did was they came out with this Pac-Man style game where Tata logo was in the form of Pac-Man, which was eating the turtles inside. So the game was called Tata versus Turtles. And that was the subject of a defamation suit, trade libel, trademark infringement, all that, 10 crores. Tata and therefore Mr. Rohinton Nariman was their counsel in the Delhi High Court. I was the second chair on that matter. And if you go through it, you'll realize they are dogged and they persevere. Nobody is an expert who is speaking on everything under the sun, from, as I call it, ethnology to gynecology. अपने दायरे में आप ठीक से बोलो, वही बहुत बड़ी बात है. You can't be an expert in everything under the sun, so you stick to it. So when suddenly people say, आप वेदों पे बात करें, मुझे कुछ आता ही नहीं है वेदों पे, मैं क्या बात करूं? Because they think, oh, he argued in Sabarimala, therefore he must be an expert on Shastras and Vedas. No, I'm not. I will at best go 1 or 2 degrees of separation from my area of core competence. I will not go beyond that. I'll not make a fool of myself, Baba. Imagine if somebody decides to speak on law without having anything. It's an insult to me and my professional people who have been busting our asses in court. My apologies for the French. Who are you to talk on the subject? Baith jao. They respect it. And second, When the left works, they will cede space to someone who's better qualified than them on a subject. They know when to give way and when to take the lead. This is the subject, he's been working on this, or she's been working on this, or they have been working on this for years, so let them do it. You don't have that still. This is how an ecosystem is created. But let me also recognize the people who have done that. It's important to recognize this. Vikram Sampath, brilliant. He has finally put together a fantastic institution, or an institution in making, for identifying talent in the realm of history. Brihat and Bodh on the question of policy making. Rahul Diwan on the question of funds. You identify your area, don't try to be in everything. Stick to it. So when people say, how can we contribute? Now, I don't have a crystal ball, nor do I have your Jatakam in front of you. So I can't sit and identify इसके horoscope से कि इसका राहु कहाँ पे, इसका शनि कहाँ पे, मुझे क्या पता? ये तुम decide करो. You should know your strengths, but you know that you have to contribute. You know your strengths, and you move in the direction. Ecosystem is built like this. And to the money bags, I have only one request. You know how to make money. That doesn't mean you know our subjects. You stick to what you're good at, which is to make money. And if you want to support us, you support us. Don't come and dictate to us what we must be doing. I am done with that. I'm so sick and tired of sitting there and getting gyan from the money bags. This was in the initial years because I never went and sought money for anyone. If someone needed it, I'd say, okay, I'll go and speak to someone. I had to suffer 4 hours of drone attacks. The droning was going on and on and on. I said, Ayya Sami, I can't do this. It's worse than Sade Sati. I'm not sitting there. And I'd rather put myself in a spot where I issue the check as opposed to asking someone for it. And that's exactly what I've been doing over the last 4 or 5 years. This is a long-winded answer to your short question because this is how you work on the issue of policy. Okay? Now you have so many people who are actually creating institutions. They're making their efforts. Now it's for platforms such as these to find ways to support them. Next.
Hello. GSI Deepak ji. My name is Bhageshri Trivedi. My question is this. Hinduism has never aligned itself with one political state or religion, institutionalized, so to say. On the other hand, the word secular comes to us in Europe, trying to distinguish or create a distance between the church and the state. And now we take that word and we put it into a preamble, almost implying that you are doing something wrong all along and now there is something new that you must do. Is that the core of our problems and confusion?
No, actually, even if you'd embraced European-style secularism, you'd have been more Hindu. Because their secularism doesn't mean you think secularism of Europe is the secularism of France, which it is not. They may have gone for liberty, fraternity, whatever that is, equality, thanks to the revolution, but not others. They are avowedly Christian. They have been de-Christianized because of their charvakas. They're atheists. We are not. So I don't see a problem with European-style secularism actually affecting us. The way we have understood European-style secularism is the problem. Because the slave thinks he has understood the master, which he is not. He is actually understood in a very half-baked fashion. It's like a pig's breakfast. It's a hodgepodge of things. I have cited this in the first book. There are better informed people. European-style secularism is not irreligious. It is not. They have their own denominational churches which they see as the core of their identity, the Anglican Church for England. Every monarch has to be seen as the defender of their respective denominations and faiths. So what secularism are you talking about when it comes to Europe? It is us who is actually, because you have taken some portions from America, some portions from France, even from Czechoslovakia you have taken. Some of your provisions are from Czechoslovakian constitution of that period of 1914 and whatnot. You were happy to go for a country whose name most Indians cannot even pronounce, as opposed to looking inward. Okay? And which does not exist today. There is no Czechoslovakia. There is a Serbia, Croatia, and a Czech Republic, which is what is balkanization. So the point I'm trying to make is, this word either needs to be understood better or it needs to be junked. There was a reason why it was not included in the preamble in the first place. I know WhatsApp University has said this over and over again, but they don't know the reasons. But secularism was not inserted into the preamble for a very good reason, because it means multiple things for multiple people without actually having a clear definition. I'll give you one example and I'll leave it at that. To explain what is the problem when secular is suffixed with an ism, what happens then? In 2016 September, I delivered this lecture at the Constitutional Club of India, which is my first lecture on temple control. And there I pointed this out. Actually, I don't know how many people picked on this or picked up on this, which is when the Supreme Court in 1954 was looking at the Madras Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments Act of 1951 as it existed, it had to ask itself, can the state interfere with the management of a temple, how much it can, and what can it do with the religious affairs of the temple? Just open 25(2)(a), somebody please, on Article 25(2)(a). So 25(2) starts off by saying, nothing contained in subsection 1 shall prevent the state from making law or laws that exist with respect to restricting or regulating economic, political, or any other secular activity associated with religious practice. That's the broad phraseology of it. So they had to understand what is the meaning of secular activity associated with religious practice. In the course of that, they decided something which is an essentially religious practice, like puja part, you will not control that, but you will control secular aspects of that, which means what? Paisa for puja, the budget for puja. So essentially religious was used in the context of divorcing the economic or the non-religious aspect of it from the religious aspect of it. This test was applied in a very different context altogether, but subsequently it became available for what? To decide which practice can be treated as an essential religious practice for protection under Article 25. The purpose was only to identify what can the state control and what can the state not control from the perspective of secular control, which means what? Fiscal, financial control. That has avalanched and snowballed into an essential religious practice. This is how bad it is. The origins were not bad, which is to say, the state will not interfere with religion. That was the purpose of it. But the very same doctrine became the tool for redefining religion later, which is whether women can enter into a particular temple or not, women of a particular age group can enter into a temple or not. That is not what the test was meant to do. Now, when you say this, they say, gya Brahmin fascist. We are only saying this does not come in the way of minority rights, because until 1976, people are not going to say that you did not have any minority protection. If this word gets inserted for the first time in 1970s, what was happening between 50 and 76 for 26 years, where we were taking out gulags and concentration camps, and then we are saying, hello, chalo, we'll create an Auschwitz in this country. Now we know that even that may not be true. So I don't think we understand the word well, and when it is capable of multiple interpretations, the best thing to do is either give a definition or remove it. Don't leave it to judicial interpretation constantly. Next.
Namaste, sir.
Anybody else? All that.
I've been a last bencher, so something for last benchers also.
Namaste, sir. My name is Aura Mishra. I am an engineering student. So, sir, when discussions around Hindu or Indic identity are quickly dismissed in academic spaces as regressive or irrelevant, how can one respond in a way that encourages dialogue instead of being labeled simply as an anbhakt or something like that?
I think that's better. So we have tried convincing the Communist Reading Circle, which is a Sabdar Hashmi circle, to our position. We have tried convincing the neutral students to our position, the Indic circle position, and they were always like, it's not trendy, it's not fashionable, and it's not popular, and therefore we either choose the opposite side or that position is irrelevant for us, which is, I think, the problem in the generation itself. So what is your solution for this?
Sir, I am Vishwa Patel, and my question is based on decoloniality and feminism. That do you feel that there is a need to reinterpret feminism and equality in Indic way? And how to do that? Because there is a narrative runs like, don't treat me as a devi, treat me like a woman. And I have seen many of my friends first being baited for women's rights and feminism, and then getting trapped into leftism. Yes.
I'll be told no uterus, no opinion. What do you want me to do? Next.
Hi, so I'm Advocate Samruddhi Seth. I wanted to ask this question. Since I'm working as a policy consultant, I just wanted to ask this question. Since you yourself argued in the Sabarimala case, where the other question was also related to the judicial interpretation and how the court, interpreted Article 17 in a very wrong way. They took the matter of untouchability to the Sabarimala judgment, which makes no sense at all, right? So how do we count? I understand that the state needs to do more with regard to the jurisprudence aspect, but also how can this judicial overreach be stopped?
Yes, lovely question. I love this question because this was one of the points of review actually. In the review petitions, this was actually one of the central issues raised, that when untouchability was being discussed in the Constituent Assembly, Article 17, they said, if you do not use this as social untouchability, then even the muddy or the ritualistic purity that you follow at home before a puja can be brought into this, and somebody can accuse you of untouchability. Or some of these videos that idiots post on X, and I use the word idiots responsibly, which is when there is a pujari or a mathadipati in a temple or in a matha, they are following muddy, therefore they can't touch you. Regardless of your jati, it doesn't make a difference. So when you receive something, they will offer it from a distance, they will not touch you, and sometimes they might even throw it away. This has been accused of Brahminical patriarchy, untouchability, and all sorts of nonsense. That is the consequence of the abuse of the word untouchability. So the framers of the Constitution specifically said, busybody litigants, and these are the words that they used, will use the word untouchability to go after every religious practice, calling it untouchability. So we had actually said this is social untouchability, which means something that stems from your birth, to say that thanks to the community in which you were born, you shall not be touched. And therefore, when you speak of Article 17, remember that that is the context of Article 17. And therefore, it made no sense to invoke into the context of the temple. Specifically speaking, we said that. Okay. So I agree with you. There was mischief. And this does not, if you want, let's say, a state solution to this, clarify the provision. Now that you know what is the mischief it can lead to when left to interpretation. A lot of amendments in the Constitution or laws are typically brought out when judgments expose a flaw, or that flaw plays out in the judgment itself. So here is one of those instances where the undefined nature of untouchability led to untrammeled breadth, which means they could actually expand the definition and the scope beyond the original intended context. So the state can amend it, or that's of course subject to what the judiciary now will review. So I can't say beyond that, but it's the position taken there. I hope that answers your question. So there is a solution through the state as well as through the institution of the judiciary. Okay. What was the other question? So sorry. Your question was on campus and you on? Okay. So I'll combine these two questions. Obviously, it's been a while since I've been a student. So all I can think of is what has worked for us. I don't know how much of that experience works for you. But thanks to my interactions with students across campuses across the country, I know for a fact that the desperate lover approach does not work. Meaning, don't be desperate for their attention and their validation. It hasn't worked, it won't work. Because when you do that, you're automatically putting them on a pedestal. Which is to say that you have automatically handed to them the position of intellectual superiority and you're hoping that they will bless you with their sight. बोले हाँ कभी तो मुझे देख ले. Don't do that. I don't think that works. What has worked is when like-minded people, I think like mutants, you will identify each other. We have gone with Kalava sometimes just to see if somebody else is wearing it. The Tika has helped. Some opinions have helped. Because that's what marks us as targets also on campus. Right? I don't know what other means that you can use, but what I think some of us have tried to do is create a disruption from the outside to give opening to those like-minded students and the fence-sitters. That the risks that you can't take staying within the campus, we can take because the campus does not affect us in any way. So that's one of the reasons I have tried to engage with students, because I not sympathize, empathize with that situation. I relate with it. I relate to it. I have been through that. So the idea has been to go there and pry that conversation open. Sometimes being deliberately provocative where necessary only to defy the audience, and sometimes to give them a different flavor of how this can be approached. I'll give one example, may not be the best example, but it has worked. March 2024, I was in Stanford for a conversation there. It had a fair mix of Desis, the ABCDs or whatever, and others also, who were curious to see what is going on here. I had a Scandinavian gentleman who was part of their innovation setup, their incubator, who said nobody has presented the nativist perspective of India from this perspective in terms of what your aspirations are. What is it that you stand for? Because we've always consumed it through the Western lens. And our lens is always liberal or fascist. These are the only two boxes we put people in. Now he saw it slightly differently. Maybe, and I don't think I have the silver bullet for this. I just think that the way you conduct yourself also makes a difference. Because I think sometimes a decent messenger is half the battle won for the message. Second, I think the way you articulate it. The mistake that you will make is to be a mouthpiece for a political establishment. Focus on the policy as opposed to the politician. It appeals to people because you don't want to be seen as let's say, a bootlicker. And that's the one thing that will certainly put people away immediately. And I'm not saying this as a matter of strategy to hope that then you can convert them to your side. I don't think you should hope for that. It doesn't work. It certainly won't work. I'm consciously saying all of this knowing fully well that it could also endanger people's careers on campuses. I've seen that as well. So sometimes I've said, fly under the radar, wait for the right time, see, judge. But in the meantime, make sure that you don't get brainwashed. घर वापसी के चक्कर में पता चला आप नेबर के घर में चले गए. That will be reverse indoctrination. We would have actually lost one person. So that has certainly worked. Sometimes maybe calm dignity works. And when I'm not saying take everything lying down, that's the last thing I will ever advise. I will hit back, and that's been my tendency. But of course, when there are attacks on Twitter, so for instance, from our own side, people keep attacking once in a while. Oh, he is this, he is that, he is the, apparently I've received money from China. So when that happens, you might as well let go. Not every battle is worth picking. Choose your moments. So to sum it up, I think who you are as a person makes a bit of difference. 2, the quality and the manner of articulation makes a difference. 3, nothing succeeds like success. Even if there are members of the left who hate my guts and who would want to see a Charlie Kirk-esque situation with me, who have said as much, members of the left came out and said, don't do this. I'm not giving them a clean sheet, except to say, he knows what he's talking about, so be careful before you brand him an idiot. And be careful before you say these things. So, if your core competence works to your advantage and you prove yourself there, right or wrong, it manages to give you a pedestal to stand from. To say, at least he's not an idiot. He knows what he's talking about, or she knows what she's talking about. And On campuses, this is what worked in IIT Kharagpur. I might also say this. So SFI was very prominent and strong. This is IIT Kharagpur, very close to Nandigram. And it was happening when I was in law school. She was in the opposition. She was asking people to vote her into power to vote out the illegal migrants. That was her plank, by the way. Okay? And since SFI was strong, and then in 2000, this is 2006 to 2009, therefore the transition in 2004 has taken place. The director then started closing down all the vegetarian messes. He said, follow your ISKCON somewhere else, follow your vegetarian elsewhere. We won't actually tolerate all this. We will serve everything in every hall. Out of all the halls there translates to the hostels there, only 2 halls had pure vegetarian halls or other canteens. So we said, what do you lose in having just 2? And they shut it down deliberately. So the ISKCON guys came running to me because Upadravadi to main hui. To bula liya, and they assumed that vakil ho to gunda hoga hi. That's some assumption. So we had to go, and I had to ask him, if some other person with a mustache, without a mustache and a beard had created problems with the way you're running this place, would you have not listened to him? I had to ask this question bluntly. He said, what is this? What politics are you bringing? I said, you brought in the politics. I'm asking you, what would you have done? You're only asking for 2 vegetarian messes and nothing beyond that. And it's not something created specially for us. It's been there since the inception of the institution. Why are you shutting it down separately? And so this was the nature of the campus. So IIT has a slightly different culture. Just take 30 seconds, not more than this. The BTechs, MTechs and the PhDs. BTechs are seen as the creme de la creme. The MTechs were called matkas. And the PhDs are called dadajis. Okay. So if you want an institution to survive or a tradition to survive, your target audience will be the BTechs. Because their energy levels are fantastic. Once they start something, they'll stick to it. And 2, what are they aiming for? Placements. Placements के लिए क्या चाहिए? Certificate. So we said, चलो भाई आपको certificate ही चाहिए, तो हम आपके लिए यहाँ पे competitions करना शुरू कर देंगे. So Raghav Mittal, who was a 5-year graduate from IIT Kharagpur, before he left, he founded SFIH, Students Forum for Indian Heritage, to compete with SFI. So when I came on board, I decided to run the place with the help of another guy called Manish Kumar, who was from MSc Mathematics 5-year integrated program. He's from Bihar, and both of us decided to run the place. So we said, chalo, kuch karte hain yahan pe. We have to change the way this whole thing operates. We need to bring in the English-speaking crowd. Because that's the crowd that has a problem with us, because I think they think that the ideology smells. So let's bring them in. So Jigyasa was the quiz competition. Abhivakti was the essay competition. Manthan was the GD. And we brought in English-speaking, saffron-wearing, brahmacharis from Ramakrishna Mission, who were products of Exime Bhuvaneshwar. Just to pull the audience in and to say, if you have a problem with the language in which my message is conveyed, बच्चे पैदा करो नहीं, demographic inversion, चलो बात करते हैं. We'll turn it around, and then we'll see if you can focus on the logic and the principle of the position as opposed to the language in which it is delivered and the color that you associate it with. Let's see where this conversation goes. By the time we came out, I think we managed to make some dent. We were the first persons to invite the then spokesperson of the RSS to the campus, Mr. Ram Madhav. That was the first time. So the campus newspaper was called Scholars Avenue, which ran a front page editorial against us. Saffron invades IIT Kharagpur. ऐसे आज तक इग्नोर करते रहे, चलो हेडलाइन बन गया. बहुत अच्छे. No publicity is bad publicity. Now we are in the spotlight. So what that did was, it started a conversation. Until that time, your existence was unknown. These are some things that we have done. I don't know how much of it will work. I'm just saying, you have to use some degree of yukti along with pragmatism of how to operate in the campus, because I didn't go there to become a student leader or whatever it's. I was very clear. I skated of student politics. I never contested there. The only thing I said was, I'm tired of this leftist nonsense. I have to respond. And that's the reason I chose law. I said, after you have taken up the profession, you might as well see what to do with it. So this is how we push the envelope a bit with no hidden agenda. Our agenda was crystal clear, except that it was packaged better. Okay? And I might as well say this now that I have an opportunity of taking up pot shots at a few people who are on X, which is, I've often been told by people, you have so much of a problem with people being imported from other parties into BJP or whatever it is, and you're supposed to be a Puritan and whatnot. How did you write for Bloomsbury? You shouldn't have accepted Bloomsbury's publication in the first place. I said, I didn't change after accepting Bloomsbury. I used Bloomsbury to push my agenda. I pushed them into subscribing to my ideology, and I'm pushing them, and other publications have lined up outside my door for similar writing contracts. Which means I haven't changed. If anything, I forced them. Second in command of Indian Express comes to my office saying, please write. You will have more viewership or more eyeballs. I said, ma'am, if I start my own blog, I know where it will go. So I know what exactly you have come here for. You want a diversity quotient? No problem, I'll do it. So I put my foot in the door there. The point I'm trying to make is, as long as you're clear that you will not change, I don't have a problem using whatever comes my way to push my point of view. I'm clear about that. So there's a saying in Tamil which is Vallavanukku pullum ayudam, which means someone who is capable, even a blade of grass can be a weapon in his hand. So I'm perfectly comfortable operating under that because I've lived through 98 to 2004, 2004 to 2014 and thereafter. And I've seen Sri Vajpayee's speech in 1996 as well. I'm a product of that generation. And I grew up in 1993 when there were riots in Hyderabad, post 1992. I've grown up around that period. So I've seen all these shades. So I know how to survive all of this and still make my point. You will have to find a way to do that. Thank you.